Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode or chapter of our immigration journey. Today, we have a very special guest with us. We have Dobrina with us. She's an immigration attorney. And I think this is a great podcast episode or chapter because immigration attorneys represent immigrants, non-immigrants at different levels, right? So they are the true voices of migration. So I welcome Dobrina for on this series, on this chapter, and I'll let her give some introduction to her, what she's doing, what she's up to, and then we'll start digging more into her journey and EB-1, the code that you want to look into. Thank you, Dobrina. Please take the stage.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me today on the podcast. So my name is Dobrina Ustun, and as you mentioned, I'm an immigration attorney. I specialized in employment-based immigration for the most part, and have been working on with EB-1 cases, EB-1, EB-2, EB-2 national interest waiver, O-1, basically with all the extraordinary people out there. So that's that's kind of how I sum up my work. I've been practicing for 13 years now. So it's been a journey, but no regrets for the most part. I can't say it's boring. It's very interesting, and at least on my end, is it frustrating sometimes? But I think I think the goal is to just keep helping extraordinary people get their green cards and come to the United States.
No, that's great, and I think uh, I have this connection. I've built this connection with the attorneys over the years, like because when I went through my case, I could understand like they have so many things going on. Like each case is so different, right? And then
Yeah.
they have to kind of find out the realm in each case, build it up, find the answers. Sometimes I think attorneys do more research on you rather than you would do on yourself. So I can completely concur with the thought of interesting, boring, and sometimes it's a lot of work as well, right?
Yeah.
So I see that you are the founder of Ustun Law Firm in Dallas. So how big is the firm? Like how many cases do you generally deal with? I think you deal with all the possible employment based
Yeah.
green cards and visas. So how's your day to day at Ustun?
Yeah, day to day, very, different every day.
Right.
But yeah, so I'm based in Dallas,
Mhm.
and but of course, practice immigration that allows me to practice in 50 states and outside the United States, representing individuals who want to immigrate to the US. I'm a solo practitioner, so it's a boutique law firm. I don't, so in terms of the extraordinary cases, I don't file, it's not an assembly line. I don't file 100 cases every day. It's, tailored. Basically, everything is tailored to the specific case. I choose my cases very carefully. In other words, if I don't see that the person, satisfies the criteria or qualifies, or that I have a strong case in my hands, I don't take it. Sometimes I will, if I see that they don't have it yet, but there's potential, I'll work with the individual to kind of build it up to the extent possible. So yeah, so it's very, I'm engaged with every case, so I'm the point of contact, and that takes a lot of time, but that's kind of how, I have been successful with, pretty much every case that I have dealt with.
Wow, that's I think so. I can say it's 100% success rate.
Uh,
Close to 100%.
yeah. I mean, I could say, well, obviously, we had the RFEs and other things, but it's just because that's my business model, right? So every firm has a different business model. So some firms, they file, massive amounts, but that's how that's their business model, right? So maybe they have cheaper fees, maybe there are other things going on. And other attorneys, they file only like very specific cases or very limited number of cases, but they just make sure that these are really good cases. So everybody is different.
Makes sense. Yeah, and I think it makes sense to stick a strong case because first of all, it'll help you streamline what is needed, what kind of research is needs to be done. Because if there is a lot of segments lacking, then it's a lot of work at hand to get it done, right? So it makes sense. And I think before we dive a little bit deeper into EB-1 or cracking the code for that reason, so how was like what motivated you to become an immigration attorney? Like, what was your, let's say, journey through becoming an attorney, then specializing in immigration? What was all that? Let's learn about that.
Yeah, well, yeah, as I said, I keep asking this question myself, myself this question all the time. But uh, well, one thing is, obviously I'm an immigrant myself.
Mm.
So when I came to the US long, long time ago, actually 1999, obviously things were very different.
Yeah.
I don't want to say, I mean, they were easier, I guess, but
Mm.
still hard to go through the system. So just going through that journey, I came as an international student to finish my high school here. So last 3 years of high school, and then I continued, with the F1 through college. So a lot of, all of my friends, connections, everybody was, either international student or from someplace else. So, and everybody had a story, and I just, I don't know, I guess it was a little bit also selfish. I just wanted to be part of that story one way or another. So yeah, so then I decided that, the best way to do that is, to go to law school and ultimately become an immigration attorney. So I went to law school with the idea to become an immigration attorney. At some point, I thought that might change because that's very common. Once you go to law school, then, you
Yeah.
get exposed to different things, and maybe your career trajectory will change, but it didn't.
Mhm.
So, 13 years later, here we are.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And so, like when I talk to immigration attorneys, right? So, law school is tough, right? Passing the bar is tough. So, and immigration, I think it's a giant ball of thing where you have so many different, let's say, visas, green card categories, and rules, bills, and so like how is the workload? Like, how's the load at school? Like, is it very tough? Because grass is always on the green on the other side. We always think, oh, well, the other course might be a little easier from the one that I'm doing. But how was law school in terms of the course, like immigration specifically?
So to be honest, I never took immigration class in law school. Because it's different, it's when you take a class, the course is based on cases, and it's not really like practical necessarily, just the so anyways, and it didn't fit my schedule, so I didn't take immigration class. But what I did is I did internships every semester,
Mm.
doing like at nonprofits doing immigration work.
Mm.
So ultimately, that's how I started, gaining that experience through law school. So every single semester, or during the summer breaks, I was doing some kind of internship
Makes sense.
involved with, immigration work.
Makes sense. So, okay, so this is how like internships basically kind of pave your path towards which specialization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because then you get exposed to actually what it means to practice immigration law. You see it in reality versus reading the book. Nothing wrong with the book,
Right. Right.
but it's one thing to read it. It's a completely different thing, to go and actually see it.
Makes sense. And I think with that, if we switch gears towards EB-1, because I think a lot of the audience listening to this may be kind of focused onto that part, because how
Yeah.
Dobrina helps her clients like get to that EB-1, right? What is the code? How to break that code? So, or crack that code for that reason. So we'll start with this very general overview of EB-1, right? Uh, so from my understanding, and feel free to correct me because I'm still a person who's learning about EB-1. Even after achieving it, I'm still learning new things about it every day. So it seems to be a two equation game, right? The first is you need to have at least 3 out of 10 criteria, where you have to make sure you have evidences, impact quantified, and then you have the Kazarian analysis or the qualitative analysis, right? Taking these into two account, like how feasible is EB-1 from your standpoint, being an attorney, dealt with so many cases? Is it feasible? Is it feasible for a person to think about it if they want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think with, everything out there, it is feasible. I think it's not easy though. So, I don't want people to think, oh, okay, everybody qualifies. It is feasible, and but it's not something that happens overnight. So I deal with different kinds of people, and some when they come to me, they didn't know about EB-1. They just heard about it maybe, like, I don't know, a couple of months ago.
Right.
But because of the nature of their work thus far,
Mm.
without knowing about EB-1, they kind of they establish themselves,
Mm.
in the profession as an expert. And when they come to me, I mean, they're ready to file for EB-1. It's just because of their career track, what they did,
Right.
without building a profile.
Mm.
So, and I always say, this is the best case to have.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Because, and then because you can tell, it's like, okay, so when did you do these, like, 105 publications? Oh, well, in the last 10 years, or I was published in like 3 publications, and I'm like, when? Oh, a couple years ago, 3 years ago. And
Right.
it's kind of natural, right? So this is one type. And then we have the other type where, they heard about EB-1 maybe a year ago, and they said, okay, so I have X, Y, and Z, but I don't have the rest. So
Right.
what can I do?
Ex-
So then they have the basis, they have the experience.
mm.
It's just that maybe it needs some tweaking. Maybe they need to do a little extra. They're like, a lot of people say, oh, I was invited to join this organization, but I was so busy with work, I didn't think that's important. Well, now it is important.
Right.
So that's a second bucket. And then we have the third one where it's people usually say, okay, yeah, I heard about, EB-1 yesterday on this podcast. And do I qualify, or how can I qualify? And usually, the conversation with, this person is, different
Mm.
than with the previous two, because now they don't really, I mean, they don't have yet any of the requirements,
Right.
but they're willing to put in the time. It doesn't matter if it's going to take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So we have, as you see, different type of people, different experiences, different career levels, and all three could qualify. It's just in a different way, or
Right.
they take a different path to get there.
Right. And I think even the amount of work would be different because let's say the first case you said already have a publication, maybe citations and significance. So that's already a baked case, for example.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And I think when I talk to people in the consultation calls regarding EB-1, and I think everyone asks this question, when should I reach out to an attorney? Like when should I start working with an attorney? And I think that's what I tell people that okay, whenever you have at least figured out the top three criteria, that's the
Mhm.
time you should start thinking about it, talking to attorney, taking their guidance to further fill the gaps, right? So I think you have put it in a very great way, like, okay, these could be three possibilities, and this is how your amount of work or pathway would change according to it.
Mhm.
Makes
Mhm.
complete sense. And in terms of like, okay, so we discussed the feasibility, amount of work, maybe the path one would take would be different. But any biggest barrier or challenge you see for an individual in cracking that code? Like, what could be that challenge that one can face for getting to an EB-1 uh, green card?
Yeah, I mean, I think a common challenge is, like, let's say, the take an individual A.
Mm.
They spend 10 years, working really hard to get where they are today. They didn't really think about, networking, didn't think about, posting about their work. I call it bragging about your work. So nobody knows exactly what they're doing. But and then now they're like, okay, so where do I start? How do I get these like connections in order to get into this group or membership or whatever, or
Mm.
even letters of recommendation? How do I get letters of recommendation from third party, or people don't know about my work? I mean, I do amazing things, but nobody knows about it. So I think that's a challenge. Obviously, this person will take more time to get themselves out there and actually, start telling people what is it that they do and why is that important.
Right.
Uh, because unless people know, when I say people, I mean people in the industry, other experts, unless they know, then it's going to be very hard to kind of get acknowledged and get that, get these letters of recommendation from others in the field. So that's one challenge, and we do see it. I mean, and it's nobody's fault. It's just that that's what they did. That they never thought that they have to brag about their work.
Right. No,
um,
yeah, I think you raised a very good point because in my journey, right, coming back to how I went to EB1 is like I didn't even know that EB1 is possible for me. I was not even aware of it. And I started working with a law firm for a EB2 and IW because I thought, why don't we do that? Because that way I have a self-petition, I'm in the line, and I will see how it goes. And when I came to know about EB1 and started working on it, then this barrier also came to me, like, how would I go get these letters? Who would write a letter to say that my work is important, right? And I think for research personnels or people from science, it's a little easy because they can go to their citations and maybe ask people who have cited work. But coming back to technology people, like people in product management, technology, maybe business, is it even possible? Like, how do you help those people get an understanding of who can write their letters and help them get this recommendation?
Yeah, so I mean, so one thing that I don't do, sometimes people ask me, it's like, oh, can you help me build up my profile? So I can't really help you build your profile. I mean, I can tell you like some of the things that I have seen the work, but I can like specifically, have a strategy tailored towards you getting your profile out there.
Right.
But yeah, generally speaking, so if it's somebody who, product manager, software developer that doesn't have, like, it's not a scientist, doesn't have citations and all that, I always tell people, your first stop is actually, your company, your coworkers, your manager, look into your higher ups, see what they do.
Mm.
Um, because once you kind of go to the higher ups, I mean, they usually belong to an organization, they know people in the industry. So start from the people that your circle. Go on LinkedIn, find people in your industry. If they got EB1, now people post these things on their profile, so you can, it's pretty easy. Like, don't stalk them necessarily, but just see what they've done, see their profile on LinkedIn, and
Mm.
get some ideas from there. So that's kind of within your circle.
Mm.
Then the second part is, and that helps, I mean, we're getting into the requirements, but join an organization, membership, basically membership criteria. But when you join that organization, get involved with them, so because that's where the people are, like, they're not someplace unknown, just hanging out there. They're in that organization. Join them, get involved, and start networking, start talking to them, and ultimately you will find people who will give you letter of recommendation, but they have to know you,
Right.
kind of.
Right.
Because it's not, I don't know if, like, let's say I'm looking for a letter of recommendation and I see somebody on LinkedIn, I stalk them on LinkedIn, I send them a message and I say, hey, can you do a letter of recommendation for me? They're either not gonna respond, or they're just gonna respond, say, you're crazy, go away.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. No, I think you're right because people ask me also like, how would I get a letter? I say, okay, networking is the key, right? If someone knows about your work, they can write about the importance. But if you
Yeah.
don't even know who you are, your work, how would I or anyone else would write the letter? So yeah, that's a great point. And that kind of leads to a very interesting segment here. So when I was starting onto my EB1, there were a lot of myths I faced, right? For example, PhD is a requirement for EB1. Like that's what I was hearing from people when I started looking into EB1. I didn't even had the research done. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have a PhD, so that means I could not qualify for this. So this is game over for me. So let's stick to EB2. And then I was talking to another company, doing my consultations and understanding the EB1 genre. So they said, well, you don't require a PhD if you can prove your significance of work through the criteria. So that was one of the myths, right? And I'm pretty sure there are all kind of myths floating around. So anyone that you want to specify or talk about, which you think is really weird and should not be floated.
Yeah, I mean, I think the myths they change over time depending on what kind of things come out from USCIS.
Right.
So they don't stay the same. But currently, some of the things that I hear. So, a lot of people think that, and because that's how it's written in the regulations.
Mm.
Like people think, okay, I just need 3 criteria and I'm done. Unfortunately, that doesn't work that way. So, and sometimes people will argue, but it says on the USCIS. So I'm like, I know what it says, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. It's not 3 criteria. You have to satisfy. If you have 8 eligible criteria, you better be satisfying 9 of those.
Right.
So as many as you can. That's what you need to do. But that's a kind of myth. The other thing that I'm hearing now, it's and it may or may not be true,
Mm.
but people are adamant about it. Sometimes they argue with me. It's like, oh, senior membership at IEEE doesn't count anymore.
Right.
I'm like, I understand, there are some AO decisions out there that says that, they rejected that membership. But in reality, a lot of my clients have it, I've used it in almost every case.
Mm.
I don't have a denied case because of the IEEE membership.
Mm.
So it's not the membership by itself, it's how you present it, what you do for IEEE, what is your involvement.
Right.
Do you chair a committee? Like, do you write papers for them? Do you review for them? So, and sometimes but it's the AO decision says this, it doesn't. I'm like, well, we don't know what people presented as evidence. Like you don't know. Maybe person didn't use an attorney. Maybe they didn't. They just presented a certificate without explaining what that membership is. So stuff like that. That's I keep hearing it all the time.
True.
Uh,
IEEE-1 is specifically right because I like a lot of people ask me like, okay, I have this membership. I tell them that if you are not contributing to the society, USCIS will come back to you because they know, right? It's not like they don't know about IEEE.
Yeah, exactly. And
Right.
I mean, basically, if you just like apply, you get it, and then you move on, and basically
Yeah.
just have your certificate. And then it's obvious that you're not involved. But now, if you're doing papers for them, if you like, chair a committee or other things within the organization, then and all of these they have their own requirements. How do you become a chair? How do you do this? They have different requirements that you have to meet, right? So and then that makes it more exclusive, basically. So we always look at that exclusivity element. Okay, you have a membership, so what? Then the next question is, what is the exclusive part about that?
Right. So
um
how you're different from others in terms of the field.
mhm, mhm.
And I think that kind of leads me to this interesting. Again, it's not. I'm not sure whether it's a myth or it's true, but I've heard people saying EB1 is also known as Einstein visa. How is it true? Is it like is it termed as Einstein visa or what's the
I
story?
think that's the non-legal sort of term for it,
Okay.
terminology. So, if I wanna explain to somebody who is not in the immigration field what
Right.
extraordinary EB-1 extraordinability is, I'll just say, okay, it's the Einstein visa.
Mm.
Uh, but you don't have to be Einstein to qualify and to ultimately get approved for it.
Right. And like moving into the criteria, right? So there are 10, right? And definitely some would not apply to one, some would apply to the other
Yeah.
because it's a mix of different things. But when I look at the criteria, I think that maybe, for example, the one that I used were the authorship because I had some research papers. I also had citations, so that kind of helped show the impact. Uh, Review, like peer review, like judging,
Yeah.
and but any particular criteria that you think can be very important or maybe a deal breaker sometimes for a case? Is there anything that like that in from your understanding of cases?
I mean, I don't think any particular criteria, like we don't have like, oh, this is the most important criteria. Again, it's, and then I'm kind of going to the Kazarian, is the totality, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's, obviously, let's say I'm the adjudicator, right? I'm the USCIS officer, and I have case number one
Mm,
where the person has four criterias that they presented to me. One has one membership, couple publications, three citations. He judged, I don't know, like one or two events, and that's it. And then compare that to case B, where the person satisfies six of the criteria. They have three memberships.
mm,
They're all involved with all of these three, one way or the other. They have 10 papers. They were keynote speaker at some, large conference in their field. They have 10 publications. They have a book written. So which case do you think
mm.
it's gonna be more favorable? Like,
Right, right.
it's gonna be case number two, right?
Yes, yes.
So it's not so much, and sometimes, like, so for me, usually, I tell clients, look, I mean, especially in tech, I always try to file cases with at least 6 to 7 criterias because we have 8 technically. The other 2 are for arts.
Yes.
So 6 to 7, have to be hovering around then. If you do 5, you better have 5 solid criterias, but like really solid. There's no question about it.
Mm,
Rarely, I've done only one case, and it wasn't in tech. The person had only 4 criterias.
okay.
But the difference was that individual was on every single major newspaper out there. You Google their name and it blows up.
Wow.
We kind of banked on that, and I mean, I was still a little nervous, but I'm like, okay, this is like too much.
Makes sense.
So even though they had only 4 criterias,
Mm,
but at the same time, because that's the what they did, that who they were, and just the whole media exposure that they had, and it was organic. They were not planning EB-1.
makes sense.
That worked for them. So if that's not the case, then you better have 6 to 7 criterias.
Like more weight should be shown, right?
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
makes sense. So I think in that case, I have a small profile written here. I think I can ask
Is it some of your friends?
it,
Somebody looking for free consultation?
it's to be honest, it's kind of a mix of a lot of things, like a
Right,
profiles, and just trying to take your opinion on how would this fit, and if it is fit, like what should be the way or path forward, right?
right.
So just for everyone to show that I have this list here. Okay, so it's a very simple yet maybe extraordinary profile. So
Mhm,
the idea is that they have this product manager oblique software engineer role. So they are, let's say, expert in both and switch to product management, being a software engineer. They have masters in computer science or and also maybe planning an MBA, but not yet have it. Uh, 8 to 12 or 10 to 12 years of experience being in this field, working for tech. Um, they also lead the product. And as you know, they have been developing a product before,
mhm,
so kind of expert in both. They see that they have a high salary, like it's based on Glassdoor. And they have reviewed the code of others on GitHub, like the
mhm,
company GitHub, right? And that code review is important because that kind of defines how your production code would look or the main
mhm.
software would look. With this kind of gist, or let's say summary of things they have, how is it even possible for us to, for first of all, to think about EB-1? Let's start with that.
I mean, as I said, everybody and anybody can think about it.
Mm,
Is it a strong case right now? No.
mm. Yeah.
But the again, depends on, you said that they're product manager, they lead a, major product. So obviously we want to know what that product is, who they work for. Usually what happens with product managers, especially, if they big companies, they lead, lead a product within that company.
Mm.
So one thing that I usually look for here is, let's say they work for Apple, for
Right.
example.
Right.
And they, let's say they work on specific, I don't know, the camera or whatever.
Right.
And they lead that team that basically works on the update for the camera for the next iPhone.
Makes sense.
We look for press release here in the
Okay.
in the media, basically Apple, basically Bloomberg or whoever talking about, this product coming up, the next October, whatever iPhone.
Right.
And obviously Bloomberg is talking about it. I'm sure that there are 10 other magazines or news media talking about it. So we want copies of all these. Now, their name is not gonna be there, So usually people tell, oh, but
Absolutely.
I'm not. I'm like, you're never gonna be there. I mean, but it's usually some VP in the company name. So that's kind of who is mentioned. But if you're the one leading that product, you get a letter of recommendation from your employer. Remember how initially I told you go
Right.
to your employer.
Yep.
And or that would be so your manager or somebody who knows your involvement with that product, and basically they link you to that product in that letter of recommendation. So indirectly,
Right.
Bloomberg is talking about you and your work.
So you have to show the chain of connection, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then and you have like 10, 20 articles like that, obviously that's a very good start for an EB-1. I'm
Mm.
not saying it's ready, you're ready to file, but you can start with that because then when you go ask people for letters recommendation, or people don't know who you are, what you do, they say, oh, but look, I mean, I have all these like 10 publications that published about my product, you can read here.
Right. Mm.
So that's one way of kind of, I mean, to starting point, basically to see, okay, you're product manager, so what kind of product do you lead? Is it is it on the market? What's happening? Did you file a patent on it? So, there's a lot of different things that can be explored
Right.
in that case. Um, so, and that will fit nicely into critical role, because obviously if major media is publishing about your product, you must have critical role, right?
Yeah. Makes
I,
sense.
I would assume.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you're connecting the dots based on what evidence you have, right?
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Makes sense.
So that's one way of sort of starting to dig into more the detailed sort of profile.
Right.
Yeah. High salary, that's, USCIS, sometimes it's not thrilled about this. So
Mhm.
even even if you have the high salary, we don't know how they're gonna, and what does it mean, high salary? It just depends on, I guess, where you are, and are you in the 90th percentile? That's there. I mean, you can, if you can show it, you can show it.
Cool.
And then judging, obviously you have to show proof that you've judged. Now, sometimes with judging, sometimes we just show proof that it's been done
Right.
and kind of move on. But sometimes if whatever it is that you judge, let's say it was a code or something else, actually had further impact. Let's say somebody used your code to do something else, we
Oh,
want to capture that as well, because that shows an expertise, and that also shows exclusivity, right? So, and that also shows what USCIS loves to see is how others are using your work,
I,
basically. So,
yeah. So how important your work is and that how it's being utilized.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Go ahead. You were
so
saying
yeah,
something.
so that's kind of I guess the starting point on this profile.
Makes sense. No, that's a very great summary of how, like, let's say if someone is listening to this, right, and they have a very similar profile, they can start to understand, okay, where this is my starting point, right? This is where I
Yeah. Yeah.
start collecting evidence. And a lot of people have this question, like on LinkedIn when we talk or when we meet as a group, that okay, can adding a degree to my profile, like let's say if I embark on an MBA or let's say if I do a PhD, would that help my case? Would that bring me closer to EB1? What do you think about that? Is it more about work that you do? Is it more about the educational acquaintance that you have?
I mean, the generally speaking, EB-1 doesn't require a degree.
Mm,
So I don't I don't think that will add any value to it
mm,
unless the in the process of getting that degree you're gonna get some kind of exposure to the industry, or there's
right,
something very specific about it that
right,
will help you build that that profile. But the degree by itself, again, you don't have to have a degree. So, you don't have to have a degree, you don't have to have certificates. It's not a education based immigrant category, let's say.
right.
So yeah, I mean, unless you really like, let's say it's a PhD, and that will give you opportunity to publish, to speak at conferences, to do these extracurricular activities. I guess fine, but the degree itself, it's not gonna really impress the adjudicator. It's more of the impact of your work.
Right.
So yeah, so generally speaking, I'm not like, too concerned if somebody comes and says, well, I don't have a degree, but I have all these things, for the last 10 years. So yeah.
That,
Similarly, like sometimes people say, but I have like, 4.0 GPA. And I'm like, well, that's great, but it's sort of irrelevant
right.
because, just because you were a good student doesn't mean that you're gonna excel in the industry, right?
That's
So,
a great point. Yeah.
some people are great at school, some people are great at taking tests, but then they go work and they're not really great there. So, so
That's
it's two
very
different skill sets, if you ask me.
right. I think it kind of all falls back to how exclusive your
Mhm.
work is and how you show that, right?
Yeah.
That's great way to put it. I think I love the way that you showed everyone like, okay, if you do really hard, like if you really excel at what you do, and then you can show that in an exclusive way, it's possible. It don't need a fancy degree to show that you are really an expert. Makes sense. And I think that leads to the other segment, or probably the second last segment of this podcast, is a lot of people who will be applying for EB-1 are generally in full-time work, right? Let's say I was working full-time for Children's at that time. A lot of people I talk to, they are also working full-time with different companies, maybe Microsoft, Apple, and so on. So the time they have at their hand is pretty limited, right?
Yeah.
And everyone asked me like how to approach this that thing, because from my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that 40% of what you do at 9 to 5 contributes to EB1, but 60% is what you do outside of your 9 to 5 in the niche to help, right? First of all, how true is that? And if it's true, how to manage time while working full time?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't, I don't like to put like percentages because it's different for everybody. But in terms of how to kind of strategize or how to do it when you're working full time, again, that depends also on person. Some people they want to tackle one category at a time, some people or one criteria, some people want to work on all of them at the same time. I think that's harder, but then, people are different. But
Right.
one thing, I would say is like, look at the, if you want is your goal, look at the criterias and see which one, like, for example, if you take membership, so membership, depending how you play your game with that, will help you to satisfy at least 2 to 3 criterias
Mm.
just
Yep.
doing one. So if you do membership, again, I'm, like either IEEE or whoever, whatever membership is out there.
Right.
You get involved with them, then you start doing publications.
Mm.
So that's second criteria that you potentially will be satisfying.
Right.
Then you start reviewing for them papers, peer review. So that's a third criteria. So just starting with one criteria, then you will be satisfying three actually. But you have to, it's going to take time. I mean, it's not as easy as it sounds, obviously. So, so that's, and then you're done, then you have three criteria under your belt. So I think that approach kind of helps you navigate, better your time management.
Mm.
Obviously, if you have a very demanding job, instead of maybe a year, maybe it's gonna take you a year and a half or however long it takes you. But there's nothing really you can do about that. The thing that you can do is, not file too early, but when you're not ready.
Makes sense.
And basically get it denied and then file again and again until the magic happens.
Mm.
That's more exhausting actually
Yeah.
than just waiting and kind of being patient to gather all the evidence.
Right.
So these are some of the the things that can kind of basically tackling one criteria that will give you three others or two others additional.
Right.
um
Right. And is it true to say, like sometimes I think about this, like EB-1 in general, like the profile building, what's the right profile, what's the best profile and stuff. So sometimes I think about it, and it seems that maybe you yourself is the best judge of your profile. How correct or how true do you think this statement is?
I mean, yeah, for the most part, people do. I mean, yes, you know what you've done, and you know how you did it.
Right.
So yeah, you really, although sometimes people are not really honest with themselves. They think because they want it so much, but then they're kind of like, oh, but I'm not there, I'm not sure. But you do know deep down,
Right.
uh, and then you also know when, I mean, I've seen this over and over when, we start working on a case and then the person is, initially they're kind of there, not yet. So we kind of have to spend some time. And by the time, we are ready to file, they know they're ready. I mean, you can tell.
You can tell.
Now, whether USCIS is going to agree with us, that's a whole different thing out there. But, in terms of you being ready, you know when you're ready.
Makes sense. That's a great way to put it, because deep down, you know what content you have, right?
Mhm.
And how important it is. Maybe an attorney can help you resolve that conflict. But yeah, deep down, you best know your story, right? So I understand that. That makes sense. And coming to a little bit of academic profile, because I think most of the audience that kind of watches the channel, they are either from tech or from science and trying to aspire for EB-1. And I think this is again maybe reflecting back onto the myth section and stuff, that people think that okay, you can only file EB-1 if you are maybe on H1B or in O1. I don't think that's true, but I would like you to kind of help these people, because a lot of postdoctoral fellows, like let's say if someone has in their PhD doing a remarkable work and they have a lot of papers, a lot of citations already, and they're on F1. So can they apply for EB-1 on F1? Is it possible?
Yeah, so generally speaking, it is possible. They can file the I-140 petition. I wouldn't recommend filing I-485 if they're
Mm.
current, basically doing concurrently, because once you file the I-485, basically then you really express the, intent to immigrate, and that will jeopardize your F1 and then, your potential OPT or STEM OPT and so forth. But just filing an I-140 doesn't necessarily mean that you have immigrant intent.
Mm.
Um, I know the regulations say yes, maybe it does, but in reality, I mean, I've had clients where they'll file EB-1, we got it approved, and then after that, they decided that, they don't want to stay in the United States.
Mm.
So, filing an EB-1 I-140 form
Mm.
Doesn't mean that you're gonna file for green card. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, but you don't know what's gonna happen, so some people get better opportunities elsewhere,
Mm.
and they go. So it's not really like a immigrant, like you're not deciding to immigrate to the United States at the time you file the I-140.
Right.
So it is possible.
Right. And I think a continuation of this would be because it's an interesting segment we are talking about. So let's say if I'm on F1, I filed an I-140, and if everything worked out, it got approved, right? So when would be the right time to file my 485? Would it be on OPT? Would it be on H-1B? Like, is there any visa that you'd specifically recommend to file if I-140 is already approved?
Yeah, so that will depend on whether you're current or not. So obviously,
Mm.
if you're from India and your priority date is like July 1st of 2024, you're clearly not current.
Yeah.
So you will continue with whatever OPT and then potentially get an H-1B.
Yeah.
If you're current, let's say you're not from India or China and you're current, you can, once the EB-1 gets approved, then you can file for the adjustment of status, which is I-485. Obviously, at the time there will be some considerations as to, how long do you still have on that OPT or STEM OPT?
Right.
Uh, is there going to be a gap in like your employment?
Mm.
Everybody is different. So if your OPT is expiring and then you don't have anything else coming up like H-1B or anything like that, obviously you want to file that adjustment of status as soon as possible, so at least you can stay legally in the United States. You might have to wait for like a few months to get the EAD potentially.
Right.
But yeah, so it just depends on everybody's circumstances. Obviously, if you're on H-1B, then that's the ideal scenario because H-1B is dual intent. You can travel, you can travel, come back, and your I-485 can be pending.
Right.
But if you don't make the lottery, you
It's
just file
true.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense. So that kind of clarifies this doubt that people have, like, well, can I file? Can I not file? That's great. And I think moving on to the probably the end of the segment and the end of the podcast, there are two or three questions I have for you, right? The first one is more about how USCIS actually evaluates the evidence, because everyone has their own theory, everyone has their own ideas about it. But being an immigration attorney, you must have seen the cases very closely, right? So, what exactly is the methodology, or if there is a methodology?
Yeah.
I think it's called Kazarian analysis. I'm not sure if that's the name of the methodology, but
Yeah.
what exactly goes on in the background? Like, how is this criteria, like if evidence are evaluated and quality is being checked?
Yeah, I think for this segment you should probably invite a USCIS officer so they can actually
If they want
explain
to, if they want to. I'd love
what's
to.
happening, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, generally speaking, so USCIS, when you submit your case, you file your case. So what's happening is, I'm just gonna give a little bit of like, the procedural sort, so people kind of understand what happens once you ship your case, because
Right.
some people don't know.
True, true.
Room opens the case, the clerk opens the packet.
Mhm.
And they check for, is the check amount correct? Is all the pages there?
Mhm.
Is it signed? Do you have everything, the mandatory basically forms?
Mhm.
And then at that point, if everything looks okay, they'll cash the checks and they'll scan your petition.
Mhm.
So your petition is scanned in black and white. The reason I'm saying that is because sometimes people say, oh, but can you do color? Can you print in color? Can you draw pictures,
Right.
whatever? It doesn't matter because they will scan in black and white. So even if you have everything in color, the officer will get a black and white. So once they scan it, it goes, then they push it to the officer, and the officer, they review on the computer basically.
Mhm.
So, the reason I'm saying that is because, sometimes people spend a lot of time decorating their cases. It does not matter because they will remove all of your tabs, everything nice that you did, and scan it, and then that's it.
Okay, got it.
So that's kind of the, what happens to the case once the officer gets it. So generally they're it's two-part analysis,
Mm,
right? So, and that's what kills some people, the in terms of like why they get the approval or denials.
mm,
So the first part is obviously we call it the statutory. No, do you satisfy the minimum three criteria or not? Yes or no? So okay, so you satisfy judging, you satisfy, membership, critical role, and etc. Then the officer is not done yet. So
mm,
then they look at okay, so they satisfy all these criteria. But how, looking at this case as a whole, are they really, really of extraordinary ability? Are they really the top 2% or 3%? So, and sometimes people are like, well, what does it mean to,
right.
like, the totality? Well, that means that you better be satisfying more than three criteria. So that's where, if I get a case, if I'm the officer, I get a case with three criteria, they'll probably get denied on the totality because three criteria is not enough.
Okay,
Because
got
if
it.
you think about it, you have 15 years of experience in the field, right? You started from like entry level, now you're at some kind of a senior position.
Mm,
Well, within those 15 years, obviously, you have a critical role. You'll have a high salary for the most part. You can join an organization
mm.
and you can judge something. But so what's the extraordinary about that? Not much,
Yeah, that's a
right?
good way to look at it. Yeah.
So that's why, but now then compare that to, okay, but I have, like, I've published these papers, I published this book as well,
Mhm.
and this book is actually being used for a course at this university, and here is a letter of recommendation from that university professor that they're using my book. Okay.
Mm,
In addition to that, I was invited to speak at this, AI conference of the year, whatever that is. And I was the keynote. I presented in front of, I don't know, Microsoft,
mm,
Apple, whatever, whatever. And, these people were in attendance. Not only that, but I was on a panel
mm.
uh, with the founder of OpenAI, with this, with this, with this. So you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, taking it, like showing the massive impact from what the case you have brought,
Yeah.
right?
Versus the, previous case
Right.
where, well, I
Right.
satisfied three criteria.
Mm. So it's
So
basically, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you
no,
were.
with the totality, so a lot of the evidence that, there's no criteria for it. Like there's no criteria for conferences, there's no criteria for presentations,
Mm,
there's no criteria for other extracurricular, like, you organizing events, you do this, you do that. But that's what we use for the totality. So in addition to the satisfying the criteria, look, this person has X, Y, and Z, and they've done this and that. They also, another thing that kind of really works, sort of, is if you sit on a board, like, let's say,
mm,
if you're advising startups, so startup companies come to you and say, okay, it's unpaid position. Obviously, if you're on H-1B, you can get paid from other
yeah.
things. But, they come to you and say, okay, we value your expertise. We rate your book, we rate your article, whatever the case might be. We really want you to be our advisor on our advisory committee or board.
That's-
And, you start engaging with them. Then for your EB-1, they write a letter saying, he or she is on our advisory board. She put us towards, we got this funding, that funding. We made, I don't know, $10 million. So that's how you show your impact. And that's your totality.
Right. And like this is something very interesting because yeah, I do have seen some kind of board members or on H1B advising companies and can be impactful. But assuming that let's say you become a board member in a university helping the professors or the department uh, find a new course or develop a new course, would that be still impactful?
That, to be honest, so I'm a little, like every time we gear towards the university. So the thing is, first we need to know the reasons why they invited you. So did they
Right.
invite you to be a board member because you were an alumni, or
Mm.
they invited you because of your expertise? They don't know you, they read about you, they found you on LinkedIn, they
Right.
liked, your article in TechCrunch last week, and then they reached out. Okay.
Mm.
Two different. So if you're just an alumni, then that's not really, there's nothing excellence about it. There's no
Excellent. Yeah.
excellence. But in any event, so if you're advising an university, how is that relevant
Mm.
to your field in, data science, like to your work in particular?
Mm.
You're more advising course for the next generation that comes out of the university, but that's kind of more on like a mentorship type of scenario. So it is, I mean, I'll include it in the petition, but that's not going to be front and center, because that's different than, okay, I'm advising the startup and they went public, right? Because of what I did for them, X,
Got
Y, and whatever.
it. It's
So
the impact, the calculation of the impact, right?
yeah, but having that said, though, if you get an invitation to do that for an university, that could be your stepping stone, because once you
Yeah.
do that, then you put it on your resume, on your LinkedIn, then somebody, might be looking a startup or whatever, then that's how you get your connections, right? So it's good thing to have for your connections, for to further your other get a letter of recommendation, meet people, network, and all that.
Right. No, that's a great because I think, yeah, you're right. Because let's say if you were an alumni and you can be called on expertise to guide a course or develop a new course, that could be a very good stepping stone to get into a more of an advisory board situation, kind of situation. So that's interesting. I think this, I'm pretty sure if anyone is listening to this and is aspiring for EB-1, they're gonna get all the information that they need. And thank you for being so honest and upfront because not everyone does that, first of all. So thank you for that. And I think with that, I think we have two more points we want to discuss, right? First one is more about you, like any case that is very specific, close to your heart. Like I think every attorney, or let's say anyone who is in the field, whatever field they are, like there will be always some instance or episode close to them, right? Which might be help them or maybe learn something new from it. So any case if you can share with your audience that was close to your heart as an immigration attorney working on these different visas and green cards and stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, every case becomes really close. But I think for me, I mean, I still remember my first EB-1 case.
Right.
So, I'm not gonna obviously go into details, to protect the client's privacy, but it was so I just graduated from law school, passed the bar, and and I get a LinkedIn message.
Okay.
Mind you, that's 2012, so LinkedIn wasn't even, I don't know why I was on LinkedIn, but I was there. So I get this message, and it's, this person never met. And he's like, well, we need help. We filed for EB-1, and I'm reading that. I'm like, EB-1, what is EB-1? I don't even know what EB-1 is.
Right.
I'm like, okay, that's great. And then I keep reading, and I say, well, we filed for EB-1. We got an RFE. We don't know what to do.
Mm.
It's terrible. RFE is 10 pages. I knew what RFE was, but I didn't know what EB-1 was. And but unfortunately, he said, we that wasn't technology field.
Mm.
And they said, unfortunately, our finances did not allow us to hire an attorney, so therefore we filed on our own, and we got a RFE.
Mm.
And we try to go to like nonprofits to see whether they're gonna help with this. And obviously, when it's employment-based, nonprofits don't, you can't do that.
Right.
They don't do that for you.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this thing, that message, and I'm like, okay, I mean, that's interesting.
Mm.
I don't know anything about EB-1.
Mm.
Never heard of EB-1.
Mm.
And okay, so I responded to the client, and to the person, and I said, look, I just graduated from law school. I just passed the bar. I have no idea what EB-1 is.
Right,
But, I can help you. I'm not gonna charge you.
right,
Because, that was they were not in a position to finance it. So here we are. You take it or leave it, you
right.
know.
Yeah, yeah,
And then, obviously they agreed because there was, nothing. I mean, they didn't have any other options, I guess, at the time.
right.
And that's how I learned EB-1. And then we were able to overcome the RFE. They got
Oh,
approved,
that's,
and and that was my first EB-1 case. So
I think that's a great story because just out of law school, someone reached out to you out of the blue, and then you worked there, like help them without taking any fees, like taking
well,
it.
I couldn't take any fees because I had no idea what EB-1 was, right?
Like,
So,
yeah,
I mean,
that's
you kind of
a,
have to be honest with yourself. I'm not gonna go and, charge this person for something that I have no idea what it is.
makes sense.
So, but, I'm glad it worked out, but that
Yeah.
was, that's how I started. So.
No, that's a great story. I think thank you for sharing that because at least that tells that you are really honest. Like when you didn't know, you told them that I didn't know, but
Oh yeah, 100%. That was the first thing I said. I said, look, I mean, I have no idea what you, yeah, I mean, I have like general understanding of immigration, just,
right.
my internships and whatnot, but internships, we usually did like humanitarian, asylum, family, all that. So, I had no idea about EB-1, what's required, who can apply. But that's why we went to law school, right? Find out.
Makes sense. I think that kind of leads to the one final uh, question. It's not a question, it's more about what I have seen so till now is
Hmm.
the US immigration system, especially the legal immigration system where these employment visas come into place. It's not been reformed for a long time, right? And it's not very empowering for the talent that comes to this country. I think the country has surplus amount of talent in-house as well as people coming from outside from different countries. So from being an immigration attorney, you being yourself an immigrant, how do you see this immigration system being reformed? Is there any chance it's being reformed, or will there be any reform coming to it which that can help or empower people coming as an immigrant here?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question. I mean, I don't think the question is tough. The answer is tough.
Right.
I think I don't know if it's gonna get reformed, and the reason is I don't think enough emphasis is put on the issues with legal immigration.
Hmm,
I don't think there's enough lobbying on legal immigration. Why, what the issues are, why do we need it reformed? I know there are some groups here and there,
right.
but the biggest reason is because everybody is focused on the border,
Hmm,
on the humanitarian immigration, because that's what makes the news.
yeah.
And the second you start talking about the legal immigration, people don't really, it's not as interesting, right? So it's just, oh, okay, but it's legal immigration, you should be fine.
Hmm,
So I think there will be a reform if enough voices are screaming out there to their representatives.
makes
But at this point, I don't think it's like, we have done enough of that,
makes sense. Interesting. Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. No, I always think about this, and as you said, always see some voices coming up. Like there's a bill, there's this, there's that, but always it gets squashed somehow because
Yeah.
you're right.
Well, the issue is that, well, I think from my perspective, here's the issue. We don't have, or rarely you will have a CEO, let's say, of a big company. I mean, take any big company, on TV, CNN, Fox, you name it, all of them.
Right.
Uh, getting up there and basically explaining to everybody, how important legal immigration is to them, giving specific examples as to what happens to projects
Right.
if person X, Y, and Z cannot get their H-1B. I
Mm.
don't think, at least I haven't seen anybody doing that, and they're not doing it because they're either, they don't want to be in the news
Mm.
telling everybody, oh, I hire, all of these
Oh,
people
right.
on visas to do X, Y, and Z. But until we get that, I feel like it's kind of, nothing really is moving necessarily.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great perspective because that sums up why we don't hear much about the legal aspect of things. Like illegal immigration, everyone is focused on, everyone wants to curb it, and that
Yeah.
should be curbed. But yeah. And I think with that, the very end of podcast, I think it was great talking to you. I loved discussing all these pointers with you. And I think overall, I'm pretty sure whoever is listening to this will get a great idea of how immigration, specifically EB-1 and different things work in synergy and out of synergy. So, any final words of wisdom that you think would be beneficial for anyone who's listening, maybe in aspiring for EB-1 or just wants to come to United States as a, let's say, as a talent or maybe some to start a business or whatever their focus is? Any words of wisdom for them?
Um, yeah, a couple things. So just remember it is possible. You can do it. You can find a way. Is it gonna be easy? No.
Hmm.
But again, if it was easy, everybody would do it. That's
Very true. Yeah.
that's one thing. Then the other thing is, for folks that are in the process or thinking about it, or don't, so sometimes I hear from people, oh, I spend like hours like on these forums or these Telegram groups reading people what they say and stuff.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, stop. Don't do that because it's your case. Just because something works for your friend or their friend of a friend or somebody you have no idea who they are, it
Right.
doesn't mean that that's your case. It doesn't mean that's gonna work for you.
Right.
So, don't, I mean, do it to the extent to have an idea,
Right.
but don't really like spend 5 hours every day on forums and other platforms just like reading about it. Instead, use that to build your own case.
Hmm.
So
Focus on your profile. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much, Dobrina. This was really awesome talking to you. And I'm pretty sure, as I said, I think everyone would definitely have a great session understanding what the code is, right? And I think the code is simple. Work on your profile, understand
Yeah.
your profile, see what you're doing and how it's impactful, right? So once again, thank you so much. And I would love to have you again on the channel with some different topic, maybe more focused on immigration and how we can become the voices of that, right?
Yeah,
So
we could. I mean, we just need numbers, we just need to organize, and that's it.
thank you, Dobrina. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you.